What's up, YouTube? So today I want to show you how to make these kinds of forest Psy FM sequences. So this request came in from one of my Patreons, and it's a reference from a track by an artist by the name of Via Access. But I'm not going to go for that exact sound. I want to show you how I usually go about creating these sounds and a couple of tweaks that I usually do to kind of create variations and a couple of different effects and stuff that I like to use so that you can make it your own. You can make it unique and you can make it fit into whatever track that you're working on. Okay, so yeah, without blabbering too much, let's dive in and have a look. So today we are in Serum, and the track that I'm working on at the moment is in D sharp. So all we need to do is just set that like that. And so now if I just send it a pattern of C notes, it's going to automatically be in tune and everything like that. So I've got a MIDI pattern prepared here, but it's just legato notes, you know, long held single notes. And the sequencing of this pattern actually happens inside Serum, and we're going to use some random modulations for that. So the basics for these kinds of sounds is usually some sine waves. So let's just go ahead and set basic shapes sine waves on both of these oscillators. Then what we want to do is we want to turn the volume or the level of OSC-B down. And we can also turn the octave down to -2. Then what we want to do is we want to set this FM from B, and we want to set it up about 64, 65%, somewhere around there. So let's just get a quick idea of what the sound is that we've got so far. So it's nothing too fancy, still pretty simple. The idea is that now we're going to apply a couple of random modulators to a few parameters to kind of give it a little bit more of an interesting movement. So over here in the global, in fact, what I want to do quickly is I just want to assign the modulation here, chaos 1. So on FM from B, we want to right click and we want to say mod source chaos 1. And so now we can jump over to the global and actually change the settings here. But first, I actually want to play what it sounds like before we assign these, just so you can get an idea of what these settings are actually doing. So if we just leave it as is, you'll hear that it's randomly generating values, but it's kind of a smooth movement. So what we want to do here is we want to turn on BPM sync mono and sample and hold. And then we can set the rate to something like 1/16, because then it's going to kind of lock into the grid of the track that we're working in. Okay, so now what I'll do is I'll sometimes go in here and adjust these, but usually I'll set up the whole patch. Then I'll go into the matrix and fine-tune things a little bit. So another setting that I like to apply is to turn the level down slightly, not all the way. And then here we're going to assign it's going to kind of act like an envelope, but it's not going to close down on the sound completely. It's just going to kind of add more of a percussive sequence to the sound. And so here what we want to do is we want to set this, we want to leave it on BPM synced, and then we want to turn this to 1/16. Okay, and now we can draw in a different shape here depending on the kind of sound that we want, or kind of like an envelope. You can think of this like an envelope if we were creating a kind of traditional synth patch. And here, this point will be kind of how closed the sound hits the kind of sustain amount, I guess. But I don't like closing it all the way. I like a little bit of that tail. Okay, so the next thing that I want to do is I want to apply just a bit of filter over here. So let's say MG low. We can adjust it once we've set up the sound. And then let's apply the chaos 1 to this filter as well. So that same kind of stepped random modulation is now going to be applied onto this cutoff. I like to turn the resonance and the drive up a little bit. Okay, so over here in the matrix, let's turn down some of these values. So for example, I don't want the cutoff to go as high. I want to kind of focus more on the mids and upper mid range. Okay, so now what I like to do is I like to apply bend plus minus, and this allows us to kind of shape the tone. So say for example, if we want a kind of more wobbly sound, we bend towards the minus direction. If we want a kind of more low frequency saw wave, kind of like farty sound, we can go bend to the plus sound, plus direction. But now we can definitely hear that difference in the filter here. So I want to go back and actually fine tune this filter amount a little bit. Okay, that sounds pretty cool. Just a little bit to the plus. I find the sweet spots for this is like plus, just a little bit here, and then minus is like all the way, just a little bit close to the top. And so this is optional to modulate this octave as well. This can create some kind of nice variations. But I guess it depends what kind of sound you want. You know, if you want a more kind of deeper foresty sound, or if you want a kind of more crazy, high-techy kind of sound. Okay, so here let's apply that same chaos. Okay, so here, let me explain a cool little technique that I like to use for these kinds of things. So with the chaos, we're using that same modulation source on all of these destinations. So sometimes it can tend to sound a little bit too loopy. So what we can do is we can kind of use this curve over here as a kind of like, almost like a balance or priority, where if we, say for example, the higher we curve it to the left direction or to the top left, it's going to kind of balance the higher values on this parameter. And then if we balance this down to the low, it's going to balance that down to the low part of to this parameter. I don't know if that's making much sense, but it's a nice way of being able to kind of get a slightly different value. The pattern will be the same, but each parameter will get a different value. So say, for example, like if we want more of that high octave, we can say curve quite high to the top left. Or if we want more of the low octave, curve it in the other direction. Okay, does that make sense? Cool. Okay, that's sounding good. Okay, so let's move on to a little bit of processing. So here, I obviously like to use a little bit of EQ to remove the low end. But then here, I also like to boost this a little bit. And what that does is it kind of just creates a little bit of resonance in the low frequencies. And it kind of helps that rhythm of the low end come through a bit better. And then I'll usually turn around 3K or so down a little bit in the EQ. Because sometimes in the higher hits, it can get a bit too ringy around 3K. Okay, so with these kinds of things, there's a couple of different effects that I like to use. I like to use a resonator. This can be really cool. If you resonate it, for example, to the same pitch as the track, but like really, really low. So let's say, for example, D sharp 1. Okay, so if you have snap heap, then what you can also do is add a filter to this at a mix of 100. But if you don't, if you're just using Ableton or if you're just using Bitwig, what you can do is you can hit Control G, and then it puts this into a group. And then here we can filter just the tail of the sound and then mix it back in to the original signal. So like, let's say, for example, just isolate that kind of resonance. And then we can mix it back to the original. We could also use a comb filter for a kind of more detuned kind of effect. Oh, that actually sounds pretty good. Yeah, let's go with the comb filter here. Okay, so then I usually go with some delay. Sometimes I will put another EQ here. Sometimes with the comb filters, if you're going too lower in frequency, it can create a resonance boost in the low end. Ooh, that's sounding good. So with these kinds of things, the delay and reverb is often just a reference. Because we're using the chaos oscillator there, what I like to do is I like to render or bounce out large chunks of this audio, choose the best parts or cherry pick the best parts, and then put the delay on. The problem is now if we render it with the delay, let's put that delay on and let's render it. Now, say for example, if we want just this part here, and we go like this, we're going to have the tail from this part coming through, right? But now, if we just kind of do it before the delay, and then add the delay to the channel, we can just cut one piece, and then another piece, and the kind of delay tails will be clean. Do you know what I mean? And then I'll usually just create like a couple of variations. You see I just jumped in there, changed the octave a little bit, or changed the bend a little bit, just to get a slight tonal variation, but the patch and the sequence kind of generation system remains the same. And then we just bounce that. I'm obviously speeding up the cherry picking part. I'm not going through and picking the best parts, but you can kind of imagine how you can do this, you know, in your own time. So let's say, for example, this piece sounds good. We can just drag it and put it on this channel. Let me actually assign a different color here so we know what's going on. And say we like that hit and we want to put that through that delay as well. Then we can do that nice and clean. Everything kind of kept within single channels. We can pop this here, pop this here. In fact, we can group these all. Cool. Okay, I think that's about it. I'm going to be uploading this preset to my Patreon for all my $5 supporters, so if you want to know what that's all about, check out the link in the description. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed that. Thank you for watching, and please don't hesitate to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. Okay, I'll see you guys next time. Cheers.